adjust your mic levels. Okay, so can you say your name for me, please?
My name is Eugenia Mancini Horan.
Okay.
Not Horan.
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 Are we able to, do you want us to publish your age?
Sure.
Okay, and you're 40.
30. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, you do not.
I thought you said you want me to publish an age, and I'd be like, 27.
Your real age?
Is 40.
Okay. And I can call you Gina?
Sure you can.
Okay. All right, so why don't you tell me when you first started doing art?
Probably when I was 5.
What made you, you're 40 now, so why are you still doing it? What made you fall in love with that, really?
I think it fell in love with me more than I fell in love with it. Like when I went to college, I was taking women's studies and philosophy, determined not to be an artist because artists are intrinsically poor and it's a life, and I didn't want it. But that's when I told you before, I have pretty bad panic disorder. I couldn't sit in classrooms. So I started migrating to these art studio classes, and I could at least be there, and then I would be like, oh, I'm here, I'll paint. But they still thought I was distracting, so they put me in a room by myself. So even though I have a BA in arts, nobody taught me anything. They put me in a room by myself that had a couch, and I could smoke in there. And it was awesome.
Where did you go to school?
Potsdam.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Well, because I told them they didn't like me painting with my hands, and then I didn't even use an easel. I painted on the floor. And they said, it's too distracting. You're distracting. When you're working, you're distracting. I'm like, well, art is about distraction. And then they said, just get out. And I got a private room.
Okay, so why don't you briefly tell me how you go from graduating college and what you've been doing to ending up here?
Well, I graduated college when I was 28 because it was a 10-year process. So you want to know from college to here?
Yeah.
So I graduated, and then what the hell did I do? Then I was very heavily doing black and white self-portrait photographer. That was like, some people have like a bisexual phase. I had a photography phase. And I had been showing that and doing well with that, even though I was a painter and I was a closet painter, because painting to me is bearing more nudity than even these photographs of myself, because a photograph is always something that was there. A painting it was white until I passed by. So I told you about the boyfriend that I had, and he said, well, you need to start showing, and that was about the same time. So I started showing and in New York City, and I did really well with this series. And then I got depressed, I got a dog, and then I met my husband when he played a show in our local mall. And
In New York City, or?
In Watertown.
Oh.
And so we decided to date, which involved me going on a 9,000-mile tour with him and ending up in Reno, because he didn't live in it. He lived in a van. He didn't even have the van then. So he was like, well, if you want to date me, you got to go on tour. So he and his friend were in one car, I was in the other, and it was this 9,000-mile journey, which with my nerves was...
Across America?
I think we zigzagged a little bit.
So could you talk about, in the series that you were successful in New York City, that was your black and white, did you say it was just portrait, self-portrait?
It was called the Untitled series. They were all, if you go to my website, there's a lot of it there. It's myself in makeup, in costume, but not trying to be, just as In my paintings are characters. In my photos, I was characters.
So I can say self-portrait,
Yeah.
a show.
Yeah, it was, we'll say hinting of Cindy Sherman.
Yeah, no, I love Cindy Sherman. So
Hey.
why don't you tell me about the style that you currently have at this exhibition, and tell me why you just paint with your fingers, and it's just like finger paintings.
The painting with my fingers thing was kind of easy. Like when I first started painting, it was me like just stealing my mom's stuff, and I always just used to paint my hands and my feet, and I'd walk on stuff and do this. I think that's how that started. But then, as far as art supplies go, brushes are the most expensive, and I would rather have paint than brushes. So I'm like, screw it, I'll just paint with my hands. And that way, I feel I have more control with my hands than with a brush because I can feel the paint, but not with a paintbrush.
And is that all these pictures were with your fingers?
Yeah.
It doesn't even look like it at all.
There'll be little bits that are too small for me to do with my fingers, but not
Wow.
much in my hands. That's why I have. So at the end of a winter, a good winter, I'll have, like I can actually see my fingerprints wear down because you're just rubbing.
So I don't mean this in a bad way, but the style is, I think of like a cartoon when I look at the people. And is that intentional? Is that just the style that you like?
That's how they come out. Like I told you earlier, I try very hard not to look at other art. I don't go seeking other artists. There's some I come across that I like a lot, and one of those is Joe Horan, who I identified with his style, and then I also saw that he took a style like this and made it as one of like the top selling modern artists. So I said, okay, there is room for this, because I told you before I was doing photorealism before that, which people were impressed with, and jaws would drop. I'm like, oh, it's so realistic. I'm like, but it's so goddamn boring. So I wanted it bright in color, so that's where I am now.
Can you tell a little bit about the story you're trying to tell with your exhibition? Because I know that some of it is just sort of like what's inspiring you in the moment, because of just from what you were telling me. But can you tell, do you think your husband has an influence on that, being a musician, some of the
Everything in my life has an influence on, like I said, with my studio above his and him teaching bass below me, it's gonna filter into the painting somewhat. Like if I have a guy sitting there, what is he doing? But
Isn't that where Bass 4 came from?
yes, well that's from watching you
How she
play.
dealt with the repetitive awfulness of just listening to a bass player for hours a day below her, and you're a saint.
So you don't like look at them while you're painting?
Oh no, I don't look at anything. It's taken from life. No, sometimes I don't. Most of the time, I have no idea what I'm going to paint when I sit down. Of course, I feel like this is therapy. You have the pad, which is very comforting to me, and I get really bad seasonal depression in the winter, and so I try to paint to keep moving. So you sit in front of a canvas and you're depressed. You're like, I don't know, just put something on there, and then something will start coming out, and it's like, man, I'll keep working on it. I mean, that was basically the beginning of thinking thinky thoughts. Was I was depressed, I was angry because one of his bass students sucked so hard that I just started making these lines. I'm like, ooh, they look like hills. I'm like, what's on the hills? So my painting is always asking myself, what's there?
That's interesting, and I'm wondering if that answers my question, which is like, is there a message, is there a story that you are trying to tell through this exhibition?
I think it's that maybe there's two stories to everything, because I think I could give two explanations for every painting that I have. Ultimately, I want people to decide what the story is, and I try to leave a lot of that in there because it's not my place to tell people, and I don't want to be the person that's responsible, like, oh, she's so important, I want this thing that she thinks on my wall. No, I want what you think and identify with on your wall. But although I am pretty smart,
No, that's great. And really to wrap it up is just talk to me a little bit about, because you were mentioning before that childlike quality, how you consider yourself someone who's never grown up.
But yeah, a lot of it is I get motivated by rebelling against things. And so many artists that I meet and so much art that I see, and this is a general statement, I call it pantload art or pantload artists, where they're just so full of themselves and this red dot means so much. And I'm like, the fuck it does. It doesn't. You don't. And I never wanted to be an artist like that. That's like, this is so important and it's going to just create world peace. I'm not out to create world peace, but I'm out to make people smile, which I think could be the first step to world peace. I could run for Miss America. I would paint to create world peace.
Is there anything else that you want to say to a broader audience, if you have the platform right now?
I would ask the question of whether there is a home for this style of art in Syracuse. Because I waited to do this show because my art makes sense all together. If you see one piece of it in a group show, you're like, what the shit? But when you see it all together, I think this show is the first time that people have gotten my work. I've stuck thus far to doing very small group shows with like 2 or 3 pieces, but I'm like, I'm not going to do anything here until people see it all together. And now by the time you get to the end, you're like, I have a bit of an idea what she's doing here. Because it's hard to do this sort of work and still convey that you have talent and you're not a kid just doing this. So that's the only place that my ego steps in, is like, yeah, I'm still an awesome painter.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. That was perfect, Gina.